learning the truth about my wife. We were dating for 2 years in college and married the fall after graduation. We spent 2 years exploring our relationship before settling down and preparing to start a family. She went off birth control, and her libido skyrocketed. But it took us 3 years to get pregnant. But we ultimately got a gorgeous girl. After a few months, my wife resumed birth control and struggled with it. Her doctor modified her medications multiple times, but she experienced negative side effects with each one. We discussed it and were unclear whether we wanted another child, and because it was easier for me to have a vasectomy and then reverse it if we decided to have more children, I underwent the procedure. That happened 3 years ago. My wife has felt better since we stopped using birth control, and sex has been worry-free because we can no longer get pregnant. We actually have more sex today than we did in college. Then, 3 weeks ago, my wife's cycle was late, which is not unusual for her, and I noticed her breasts were sensitive. She began experiencing symptoms of morning sickness. Now I understand that there have been incidents of reversing vasectomies. So I went to the doctor and had my sperm count examined, and the result was that I'm still sterile. But it did not inform my wife. My wife eventually went to the doctor to confirm her pregnancy. So she sent me to my doctor to get tested. I did not go straight away since I felt really unwell from the stress of the situation. I had all kinds of sick scenarios running through my mind. In the end, I was retested, and I brought my kid in for a DNA test. I got both test results back and became severely nauseated after reading them. Yes, I am sterile, and my daughter is not mine. When my wife returned home, I showed her my test, and she denied any wrongdoing, claiming that there was a mistake with the test. I then showed her the test from last week, and she burst into tears. I finally persuaded her to admit who she had slept with, that it had only happened once, and that the condom had probably failed. I made her tell me the story 3 times, each time asking if she was telling the complete truth, and if there was anything else she needed to tell me because another lie would mean we were finished. She stated it was the first time she had done something like that. I told her how much this affected me and questioned how she could do this to her family and whether it was worth it. I asked her if she wanted a divorce, and she begged me to forgive her and put this behind us. I explained that I couldn't raise someone else's child and asked her if she would be willing to terminate the pregnancy in order to stay together. She grieved the rest of the night, but as we went to bed, she promised to do whatever it needed to save our marriage. I never mentioned the DNA test. I'll call a lawyer next week to discuss my alternatives if I have to pay child support for our first child. If she had been clean about the father of our first child, I could have swallowed my pride and attempted to forgive her, but she believed she was in the clear and didn't need to admit anything else. It's impossible to predict what I'll learn. Lawyer's update: my lawyer is excellent. She asked me to bring in a bunch of documentation. She requested my bank statements, as well as my medical and DNA results, and asked me to give her my tail. Her assistant sat with us and took notes as my lawyer reviewed my documents. After I finished, she asked me a few questions and explained my alternatives. I reside in an at-fault state, which is both good and bad. It is beneficial in that it provides us with leverage, but it is also more time-consuming and expensive. For the first child, if my wife agrees to sign the paperwork, my duty for child support is easily resolved. If she does not issue a divorce, a court-ordered DNA test, and a judge from the court may remove me without my wife's consent. In either case, I am unlikely to be required to pay child support. One option is simply more expensive than the other. My wife didn't expect the judge to award her alimony because she has a decent career and earns almost the same as me. All of this, as well as property division and other issues, can be addressed prior to the involvement of a judge. Unfortunately, due to the holidays, they were unable to have the papers available before Christmas. However, I would surely do it before the end of the year. She instructed me not to say anything until she was served. She handed me a list of things to do before and after Christmas, before they served my wife. They did point out that because we were actively trying to have a kid, it was possible that my wife was unaware that the child was not my wife has an appointment with her OB tomorrow. At this point, worrying about child support isn't the worst part. It's really about the emotional cost. The terrible revelation that you've been more of a father than the biological father. Your wife felt she could sweep things under the rug. I apologize, Alpi. So I met my sister at my house, and we began transferring my belongings to her house till the divorce is finalized, or at least until my soon-to-be ex-wife leaves and I take control of the house. We took 4 carloads to her residence and returned for the remainder. My sister felt it was necessary for her to be present for support, and as a witness. I also put the nanny cam into the living room so that I could record everything to the cloud. At about 10:45 a.m., I received a text from the lawyer informing me that she had been served. I wrote her an email informing her that I would be at the house when she was ready to talk. A few minutes later, I received a text from my wife asking why Blah. So I resent the first text and waited for her to arrive home. She left multiple texts and voicemails. They make no mention of adultery, only that she believed we were working things out, and that we would sit down and talk before proceeding with the divorce. Playing the family card, and how it will hurt the child and our families. How she feels deceived. It was an excellent one. She was still revealing her location, and it took her 20 minutes to leave work. When she stopped into a nearby Walgreens for a few minutes, the purpose of her visit became evident when a police car pulled up behind her in the driveway. According to the officers, she summoned the police because she claimed she was terrified and that we had guns in the house. I showed the officers my empty gun safe and said that I had relocated the guns to another secure location. We returned to the living room, and I showed my wife the paternity test results, which revealed that her daughter was not mine. Her response of denial and disbelief appeared genuine. She broke down and cried for almost 10 minutes. I told her this was the last straw and why I wanted a divorce. At that point, the police officers advised me to remain civil and left after I informed them that I was leaving soon to stay at my sister's place. When I asked who the child's father was, she said she didn't know. I inquired if she was sleeping with that many guys, or if she simply didn't know his name. I inquired how many times she had cheated on me between pregnancies, and she responded it was just the two of them. I reminded her that I had previously stated that if she did not tell the complete truth, I would be done. I reminded her that I couldn't and would not raise someone else's child, and that she needed to seek out who the real father was since I wasn't paying child support for someone else's baby. She asked what we were going to tell our daughter, and I told her it was up to her because this was her mess, and I wasn't going to take the blame or clean it up for her. I wrote a couple of emails last week, one for our friends and family, that included copies of all of the test findings, as well as the reasons for my divorce request. The other was for my wife, and it included copies of the same tests as well as everything I knew and had already told her. I had to go over it with my lawyer and make a few changes before she signed off on it. When she arrived in the driveway this afternoon, I sent copies to all of her friends and relatives. The majority of the responses had been one-sided and extremely colorful. In the end, I told her that if she had been honest, we might have been able to work things out, but I couldn't trust a lying serial cheater, and that if she had had her tubes shut instead of me having a vasectomy, she might have gotten away with it. I told her she needed to get a lawyer so we could go on and begin to recover. Update. We had our second meeting with the lawyers today and we approved practically everything. Except the house. Still waiting for an appraisal to come back and determine the divide. Motions were filed today and a court-ordered paternity test was arranged for all three of us. Because my soon-to-be ex-wife did not fight me on every issue, we filed a no-fault divorce petition. If all goes well, I'll get the house back on February 15th, and the divorce will be finalized on April 5th. The lawyers did a better job of separating us and reducing our conversation to a minimum. I was concerned when she arrived pale and drained of vitality. I couldn't tell if it was due to a lack of sleep or over-medication. She simply glanced out the windows as the lawyers read everything to us before we signed part of the paperwork. Walking out felt like I had released a massive weight from around my neck. HR discovered I had signed up for treatment tomorrow. My manager had placed a bottle of champagne on my desk and offered me time off if I needed it, but I told him I was eager to return to work. I am currently harassing my ex-wife's affair partner, so during and after my divorce I remained in communication with Sharon, the other betrayed spouse. We had communicated details of our ex's infidelity, and we were both concerned about the effects of her spouse's suffering, so we offered each other moral support. We converse on the phone and meet for dinner once or twice a month to keep up. Sharon announced last month that one of her pals was getting married and had invited her to the ceremony. Her ex, Stan, was also invited because he is a friend of the groom. Her invitation included a +1, and she sold the notion of me accompanying her, but only as moral support and a dig at her ex Stan. It was a weekend event, so we would share a room with double beds, absolutely platonic. I was amused by the notion, so I agreed. We flew in the day before the wedding and ate supper with several of Sharon's friends. I was presented as her friend, with no mention of our involvement in the divorce. We didn't see Stan until just before the ceremony, when they brought us to the bride's side while Stan sat on the groom's side. Needless to say, he was not pleased and kept gazing over at us, which Sharon was well aware of. At the reception, we were seated with some of Sharon's friends from the night before, and we continued where we left off, with everyone involved. Stan was sat at a table across the room from us, but clearly visible. We danced a lot together and perhaps drank more than we should. There was a brief disagreement with Stan and Sharon, but her friends immediately dissolved it in a passionate sharing manner. We went to the hotel after the reception and had cocktails with 2 other couples. Several remarks about Stan throwing daggers at us all night, a few about how cute we were as a pair, and queries about whether we were serious or not. We shrugged it off, claiming we were just pals. I had to help Sharon on the walk to the room, and I wrapped my arm around her. We were standing really close together during the confined elevator journey. When we entered the room, there was a tense moment before we kissed. The booze overpowered our good judgment, and we ended up sleeping together. We didn't talk about the elephant in the room much the next morning, because we were rushing to catch our trip home. We did run into Stan while we were checking out, and he made one remark before walking away. Once we were on the plane, we discussed what had transpired. Neither of us apologized, but we questioned the timing. We both agreed that we needed some time to comprehend what had transpired and decided to meet for dinner next week to discuss it further. I know neither of us had attempted dating since our divorce. I haven't been in the correct brain place to flirt, let alone date. I already have a session with my therapist set where I will discuss this, but we had a wonderful weekend at the wedding. To be honest, it appears that you and Sharon were both able to find some type of connection and diversion, even if it was not ideal at the time. It is not unheard of. Perhaps it was just what both of you needed at the moment.